I am just the messenger here. Researchers in China reckon cheese is better for you than hitherto thought and may reduce the risk of stroke and heart disease, which runs counter to the advice you get regarding cheese exacerbating bad cholesterol and so on. But I thought it was kind of interesting research because it's been commented on a bit. Di Hawkins is on the board, the cheese board, I'm sure she said that before, of the New Zealand Specialist Cheesemakers Association. Good afternoon, Di.
Good afternoon, Jim. How are you?
I'm sure people have often said to you that you're on the cheese board ho-ho. Have they?
Yeah, it's kind of inevitable, really, isn't it? It's one of those things that just happens.
This is a big cheese day tomorrow, is it?
It is. It's for a cheesemaker who really wants to know where they're at and has a huge passion for what they're doing. It's a wonderful way of benchmarking yourself against others. How good am I really? You know, that kind of thing. It's great.
What cheeses, speaking of variety, what cheeses do New Zealanders like? Are we connoisseurs of cheese to any extent?
Well, certainly our breadth of cheese and cheese making and cheese love has grown hugely since I was a child. So, I mean, New Zealand are fabulous blue cheese makers and blue cheese eaters. There's an awful lot of white mould hockey pucks around, but more and more people are appreciating the really good quality, oozy white mould cheeses. They're loving fresh goat curd. They're loving, you know, a wide variety of cheeses that just weren't around when I was a child.
What's a white mould hockey puck?
Oh, it's a derogatory term, sorry. A lot of white mould cheeses that can be routinely bought are hard. You know, like you cut them and they're firm in the middle and they can be very chalky. And, you know, sorry, cheese people, if that's not your cup of tea, they're just called hockey pucks because that's the shape of hockey pucks.
I noticed there are 28 judges. Do you need that many judges or does everyone just want to get some cheese?
One of the really good, robust things about the New Zealand Cheese Awards is that we have so many judges. Judges are paired, so you have a technical judge, so someone who knows actually about how to make cheese, and they're paired with an aesthetic judge who has some experience in the food industry and hopefully with cheese, but they kind of represent the more Joe public. Aesthetic, you know, taste and what it looks like matters.
Okay.
They're paired together, and so they judge a selection of cheeses. They might be white mould cheeses, or they might be blue cheeses, or they may be Dutch cheeses, or whatever.
Wow, that's quite a sophisticated judging process. Can I ask you something? How do you cleanse your palate between cheeses? Do you have to do that?
It's very much up to the judge and the judges. Your palate can get overloaded. Most of the judges will have water available as they want it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's up to the judge. What suits their palate is what they do.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, just quickly.
Very quickly. Just the question of something like a port and Stilton. So you're tasting a cheese on its own. What about balancing it with other things like a port and Stilton, for example?
Yeah, is that part of it?
You mean when you actually eat it yourself? There is absolutely nothing better than a fine cheese with a glass of wine and a cracker.
All right. Glass of wine, cheese, cracker. Thank you, Di Hawkins. Cass Carter, thank you for being on the panel. And Kerry Spackman, lovely to see you. Come back again. That's us for another week. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. And Checkpoint's coming up.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, a shake-up for EQC as its chairman resigns. The new minister says waiting 7 years for a resolution is too long. We hear from the minister and Sir Martin Weavers. An extraordinary interview with the father of a teenage girl killed in last week's massacre, Andrew Pollock. Told Donald Trump yesterday he was pissed. Today he tells me the US government's focus needs to be on making schools safe, not on gun safety. A not guilty verdict in Susan Austin's assisted suicide trial and a guilty verdict in the Renee Duckmanton murder trial. Details on $1 billion fund to boost the regions. Do Amy Adams and Simon Bridges have the numbers to be Nationals leader and deputy in combo? And under pressure, Barnaby Joyce steps down.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A euthanasia advocate has been cleared of involvement in another woman's suicide. Susan Austin has also been found not guilty of illegally importing pentobarbital. However, the jury in the High Court in Wellington a short time ago found her guilty on 2 other counts related to importing the drug which Anne-Marie Treadwell used to kill herself. Ms Treadwell's death in 2016 was not initially considered suspicious, but after a suicide note was found, a post-mortem revealed she had died from pentobarbital toxicity. The defence asked Justice Thomas not to enter a conviction, indicating a discharge without conviction may be sought. Australia's embattled Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce is quitting. He announced an hour ago that he'll resign on Monday after weeks of damaging revelations over an affair with a staff member who's now pregnant. Earlier today, a separate allegation of sexual harassment also emerged, and he says it's impossible for him to stay on while that's being investigated.
It's quite evident that you can't go to the dispatch box why issues like that are surrounding. So on Monday morning at the party room, I will step down as the leader of the National Party and Deputy Prime Minister of Australia.
Barnaby Joyce says his stepping down will be a circuit breaker for the pressure being felt by his family. Russell McVeigh says it will have an external review done of its handling of sexual assault allegations by students on internships. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Victoria University confirmed last week that several of its students had reported being sexually assaulted by lawyers at social functions 2 years ago. Russell McVeigh says what happened that summer was completely unacceptable, but significant action has since been taken to improve its workplace culture. It says its board will appoint someone outside the legal community to see if any errors were made in dealing with the complaints. Current staff will be expected to take part, as will summer clerks and former staff, and the final recommendations will be shared with the women involved. Nita Blake-Person, Aho.
The minister responsible for the government's Provincial Growth Fund, Shane Jones, has labelled it a big bloody risk. In the first tranche of projects announced in Gisborne today, 5 regions will get a total of $60 million from the fund for tourism, forestry, rail and road initiatives. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says there'll always be some risk with initiatives this large.
With ambition comes risk. With big, bold plans to make a real difference comes risk. It's all about how you manage that risk. I have utter faith that Minister Jones has set up the mechanisms we need to make sure that we achieve really robust investment in the provinces, but at a pace that the provinces deserve.
Jacinda Ardern. However, the National Party leader Bill English says most of the projects announced are simply a rebrand of existing projects, and he expects the regions will be disappointed. He says they were promised a bonanza of money, but have instead ended up with a whimper of a plan. More than 10,000 New Plymouth households and businesses still don't have running water, even though a broken main pipe was fixed overnight. The major network pipe was destroyed when a tree fell on it during Tuesday's storm. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more.
Water should be flowing through the whole network by tomorrow, once the system has been flushed of air and residual water. In the meantime, tankers and portaloos remain deployed, and a boil water notice will stay in force for at least a week. The Civil Defence Minister, Chris Farfoy, was in New Plymouth today to be briefed on the situation. He says it's not possible to control Mother Nature, but more can be done to make sure vital infrastructure is more resilient. 700 properties are also still without power in Taranaki, most in remote, coastal and eastern areas. Ko Robin Martin, Aho.
It's official. This summer has been the hottest on record, 2.3 degrees above average. And with 5 days still to go before the end of summer, NIWA says the record-breaking average may well go even higher. The previous record dates back more than 80 years to the summer of 1934-35. Meteorologist Ben Knoll says the driver of this summer's remarkable warmth has been the marine heatwave, which pushed sea temperatures up by as much as 7 degrees above average in some places. It's 5:04. Sport. Super Rugby kicks off for New Zealand teams tonight, with the Highlanders hosting the Blues in Dunedin. Tomorrow, the defending champions, the Crusaders, play the Chiefs in Christchurch. Then the Hurricanes play the Bulls in Pretoria on Sunday morning. Meanwhile, New Zealand Rugby wants to host a combined men's and women's World Sevens Series tournament in 2020. New Zealand has hosted a men's tournament since 2000, with this year's event moving from Wellington to Hamilton. The Sevens circuit currently has 3 tournaments that combine the men's and women's matches, but these are run over 3 days rather than 2, and the Chief Executive of New Zealand Rugby, Steve Chew, says that makes for a logistical challenge.
You either have to go to a 3-day tournament, which in our view is not the best practice for the players, and if you're wanting to treat the men and the women on an equal footing as we would want to, then sharing the ground and getting the timetabling of an integrated tournament is complex.
Steve Chew. The former assistant coach of the Austrian national football side, Fritz Schmid, has been confirmed as the new head coach of the All Whites. New Zealand Football today unveiled the 58-year-old Swiss as Anthony Hudson's successor. Hudson stood down last year to take up a role with the American Major League Soccer side Colorado Rapids. Schmid was an assistant coach of Austria from 2011 to 2013 and has also held assistant coaching roles with the Swiss club Basel and the English Premier League side Tottenham Hotspur. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a mixtape from guerrilla marketer Jim Wilson. There's possibly an example of his work on a power pole near you. Country Life meets a couple who've grown more vegetables than you've had hot dinners, if that's not too much of a tautology. And because it's 91 years to the day since the quantum physicist Werner Heisenberg first put the idea to paper, we have a sonic tonic dedicated to uncertainty.
And on Lately at 10, it's the end of an ultra-busy week, so we'll kick back with a few songs and a little bit of chat. It's Lately with Karen Hay on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods and a few showers, mainly about the coasts. Auckland, Waikato and Taupō. Cloudy periods and isolated showers, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taumarunui, Taihape and the east from Gisborne to Wairarapa. Fine apart from a few showers about the ranges of Gisborne, clearing tomorrow evening. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha. Fine apart from isolated showers about the ranges this afternoon. Clutha and Southland, cloudy periods and a few showers, retreating to Stewart Island tomorrow morning and becoming fine elsewhere. Cloud increasing again tomorrow evening. Bulla and Westland, long fine spells and a few showers, cloud increasing tomorrow evening. Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers, turning to rain tomorrow evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing later tomorrow. It's 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Yesterday was the 7th anniversary of the earthquake in Christchurch that killed 185 people. Today, the chairman of EQC resigned and the minister announced she's sending an independent advisor in. 7 years and 1 day after that terrible earthquake, EQC's chair issued a statement saying, and I quote, "It's clear the minister has no confidence in the board and the staff of the commission." And indeed, the Minister, Megan Woods, had begun to explicitly express her unhappiness about the number of unresolved EQC claims. On the 29th of January, she did so strongly here on Checkpoint. And today, while acknowledging the scale of the disaster EQC has had to deal with, it became very clear the Minister has had enough.
So today I announced that last evening I accepted the resignation of Sir Martin Weavers as the Chairman of the Board of the Earthquake Commission.
That's the Minister, Dr Megan Woods. Did he jump or was he pushed?
I received a letter from the Minister which was couched in terms that greatly surprised me, in which she made very clear that she was not happy with where EQC was at. She said we weren't delivering change she needed fast enough. She thought that the Commission was unable to respond quickly and effectively to the challenges without external assistance.
Sir Martin Weavers, the outgoing chair. The letter echoed a conversation he'd had with the Minister the previous day, but this time it was in writing.
And it was clear to me that the Minister, from the tone of the letter and the content, didn't believe that the Commission and its staff and the board were delivering appropriately and could deliver. So I was clearly, I'm the leader of the organisation, I take responsibility for that, and I'm getting out of the way so she can make changes.
On Wednesday, I met with Sir Martin and I outlined my ministerial intentions to appoint an independent ministerial advisor into EQC who would directly report to me on the remaining and outstanding Canterbury earthquake claims. There's around 2,600 that are still outstanding. Sir Martin and I discussed that. We then exchanged some correspondence last night and then he rang me with his intention to resign.
And do you think that was the right thing for him to do?
Oh, look, Sir Martin made a decision himself and I accepted that resignation.
Clearly, Sir Martin couldn't have stayed. When ministers speak like that to and about their board chairs, the exit light is flashing. And this is where the differences between the Beehive and EQC become strikingly and publicly apparent. Here's the minister on EQC's position in Christchurch.
It's not something that I can ignore, but there's still over 2,500 people here in Canterbury who don't have their homes repaired and can't get on with their lives.
Here's Sir Martin Weavers on the same position.
We're within a yard or two of the finish line, 99.4% completed, but with a continuing inflow, everybody is perfectly entitled to continue to make claims.
So, Sir Martin says 99.4% completed, and the minister responds,
I acknowledge the hard work that a lot of people have put in over the last 7 years in terms of sorting through these. A large number of claims have been settled, but as a responsible minister, I can't ignore the fact there's still over 2,500 people and families in Canterbury that can't get on with their lives. We need to find a way to close it out so that we can get that restored hope for people.
This is, of course, a reheating of a rehashing. For 7 agonising years, unresolved EQC claims have never left the news, and homeowners in the middle of them have been exhausted to the point of psychological defeat in some cases. Of late, EQC itself has acknowledged it could have done better.
If I look back at the 16-17 annual report, the chairman's statement, which is you, says quite explicitly there are things you could have done better. What were they?
Well, I preface that by saying, as I said to the minister in my letter of resignation, this has been a catastrophic and very, very large event. The area of concern for the minister is the home repair program and residual issues.
And that's an issue people outside Christchurch may not understand so well. Much of what's happening now is what Sir Martin calls residual issues, claims Megan Woods describes in blunter terms.
The 2,600 that are remaining are re-repairs, so that is something that does concern me.
In other words, the work wasn't completed satisfactorily or the claims not resolved satisfactorily. And that speaks to EQC having been caught out by this event. Neither Christchurch nor the country's earthquake insurer had any idea what was going to hit them. Were EQC sufficiently ready? The answer may surprise you.
No, nobody was. We had 22 staff. The board in 2008, well before my time, had done a worst-case scenario planning exercise, and they concluded the most likely and largest event they could expect to face was 150,000 claims in Wellington. We got 3 times that in Canterbury.
In short, 7 years ago, EQC wasn't ready.
Nobody could have predicted this. This is the 3rd largest insurance event in global history, John.
It was, though, EQC's job to respond. That was what it existed to do. And 7 years after that terrible earthquake, a new minister has called time on its efforts to do so. Megan Woods is putting her own person in there. EQC, like the city itself, is being rebuilt.
It's no secret to anyone that I have been calling for the fairer and swifter settling of these remaining Canterbury claims. EQC, of course, is a Crown entity. It's not a government department. So there is an extra layer with the board there, but I felt enough concern around the outstanding Canterbury claims to say that I needed to appoint someone there that would report directly to me.
And we will, in due course, talk to that independent advisor. 5:14. There have been loud cheers as a euthanasia advocate left the High Court in Wellington this afternoon after being cleared of involvement in another woman's suicide. The death of Anne-Marie Treadwell in 2016 was not initially considered suspicious, But after a suicide note was found, a post-mortem was carried out, which revealed she died from pentobarbital toxicity. Last year, a retired school teacher, Susan Austin, was charged with assisting Ms Treadwell to take her own life and several charges of importing the Class C controlled drug into New Zealand. Our reporter Anne-Marie May has been in court. She was there for the verdicts and beams in now from Wellington. Hi, Annie, nice to have you with us. There was more than one verdict, right? What were they all?
Yes, hi John. Well, there were 3 charges relating to the drugs and the one charge of assisting a suicide. So Susan Austin was found not guilty of one of the drugs charges and, of course, not guilty of assisting with the suicide, but she was found guilty on 2 charges of importing pentobarbital. Now, unusually, one of those charges was only laid by the Crown yesterday morning, shortly before closing addresses began, and that actually related to whether Susan Austin had imported the pentobarbital, which Anne-Marie Treadwell used to end her life. So despite being found not guilty of involvement in the actual suicide, she was found guilty of providing those drugs. It appears the jury sort of grappled with the drugs quite a bit. They came back with a question this afternoon after about 4.5 hours deliberating and asked whether pentobarbital was illegal in China, was it legal to transport it from Hong Kong, and what were the penalties involved. Now, Justice Thomas advised them quite properly those questions were irrelevant and all they had to consider was the drug status in New Zealand.
What was the reaction of Susan Austin and supporters to the verdicts you've just described, Annie?
Well, when she came in to hear the verdict, I noticed she looked around to her supporters and sort of gave them a sort of tenuous sort of little smile. I think she was quite uncertain herself, but outside afterwards she was absolutely delighted. She said it was a glorious sunny day in Wellington and she felt very, very lucky. Now, she had her husband and one of her sons with her as well. She said that she was relieved and rejoicing and she wanted to thank her supporters. She's actually had supporters come here from all around the country. Indeed, there was also the Australian euthanasia campaigner Philip Nitschke who had come to support her as well. She's something I've not seen before, John. I was waiting for the court to actually open this morning, and one of the court staff came out and gave Susan Austin an envelope that had come through the mail. And when she opened it, it was a card from a supporter wishing her well, and she was greatly touched by that. So it's not often you actually get an accused person receiving mail directed to the court.
To the court, no.
No, so the supporters, they all hung in there till the end. They were warned by Justice Thomas against any reaction when the verdicts were read. There was, though, that sort of collective sharp intake of breath as the not guilty of assisting suicide was announced. Now, outside the court, Susan Austin was also asked about what her future is with the lobby group Exit International, but she declined to comment on that at this stage.
Oh, thanks, Annie. What happens now, just quickly?
With the 2 charges she's been found guilty on, they actually the sentencing will take place for that in May. No conviction has been entered. Her lawyer, Dr. Donald Stevens, said to Justice Thomas, could you please not enter a conviction at this stage, which suggests they will be seeking a discharge without conviction. Of course, John, we've also got the Independent Police Conduct Authority report to come out. You may recall that the police conducted a bogus drink driving checkpoint down the road from one of these meetings and used that pretext to collect the names and addresses of those involved. I understand the IPCA had put on hold its decision on that till after this case, so we can look for that coming out now too.
Our court reporter Anne-Marie May, thank you very much indeed. It's 18 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. The father of a teenage girl killed in last week's massacre at a Florida high school says he'll be working with US President Donald Trump on school safety as a legacy to his daughter to ensure that school shooting is the last. Andrew Pollock's 18-year-old daughter Meadow was one of 17 students and teachers gunned down by Nicholas Cruz. And yesterday Andrew Pollock was one of several parents, family members and survivors to meet with President Trump at the White House. What he said at that meeting was heard throughout the world.
And I'm pissed because my daughter I'm not going to see again. She's not here. She's not here. She's in North Lauderdale at whatever it is, King David Cemetery. That's where I go to see my kid now.
What makes Andrew Pollock unusual amongst the family responses is that he's a Republican, a Trump supporter. And where most of the families and survivors are calling for gun control, he's calling for security to keep guns out of schools. Tonight he's holding a vigil at his Parklands home, and he spoke to me about making schools safe.
It has to be the same to go on an airplane as it has to go into a school or a concert or a courthouse. I don't know how it is by you, but here you can't get into a courthouse with any type of weapon. You can't get on a plane. I know where you live, you can't get on a plane. So why can it happen in a school? And why is it already happened? I think over 200 times in this country. So I'm pissed. I'm pissed off and I'm angry that it keeps happening. But it's stopping. I started it. It's going to stop now with my kid. They killed my kid, and we're going to make it right. No twists. That's what I told everybody in the world last night when I was talking to the president. We're going to stay focused, and we're going to fix this problem. It's not going to happen again. There's not going to be another school shooting.
You did tell the president, I saw you. Much of the world saw you. But Andrew, will he listen? There is so much at stake here, so many vested interests, so much money, such deep tribal divisions around things like gun control. Will the president listen?
I wouldn't have went if I thought the guy was a typical politician. I wouldn't hang out with a politician. I'm not that type of guy. He's not a typical politician. He's a real guy. Despite what the media likes to twist. I'm a real genuine person. He's got a tough job, this guy. I don't know. He flew my family and myself in, and he made time during the day to meet with us, and he was genuine. Met with my kids. He spoke with my children. He comforted them. Mike Pence came in. General Kelly. It was Sarah Huckabee came in. I was there on a mission. It wasn't like I wasn't going on a tour. He knew I was there for business.
Can you tell me about Meadow?
Meadow was the toughest out of my three kids. I have two boys, 22. I got a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old. So and Meadow was just she lit everybody. She lit the room up when she went into the room. She always got what she wanted. Her idea of exercise was going from one store to the next store at the mall. She was a shopper, but she worked hard in her boyfriend's business. She loved her boyfriend. 4 years. She was enrolled in college. She spoke to me about becoming a lawyer. And we loved her. I have a tight family, and we're all affected by this. It hurt everybody. It hurt a lot of people. And we're here like the only reason I'm taking the call with you is we're here for one agenda. We don't want to get it twisted, and I don't want you twisting it in your country. I don't know if you watched that town hall last night.
Yeah, I did on CNN. Yep.
Did you watch? It was like the fake news, we call it. They twisted the whole agenda. It's not these kids. They used the kids as pawns on that show. It was horrible. It's not about other agendas. Right now, it's just we want the school safe. That's all it is. And they just they made it something that it wasn't. That's why I didn't show up. I knew it was going to be like that.
Can you explain that to me? What was fake about what was said? In what way was it twisted?
Not twisted. It's taken away from the agenda. The agenda is we want our school safe. No other agendas. And I'm not, you know what I mean? We would just want the school safe right now. Any other agenda could wait. No other kid should get murdered in a school.
What about gun control? Is that not something you want to discuss now? Do you think that is a separate issue?
No, it's not. I'm not focusing on that now. I just want the kids safe. I just want the kids safe in a school, and the only way to make it safe is make it like they need to do it. They need to put the right people in charge that can take care of that, and they're going to do it. We got the right president in office now, and I'm going to help him. It's enough already.
So what I'm sort of getting is that we will arrive at school the same way we arrive at an airport, right? We will have to get through.
I have to. Well, this is the world we live. Yeah.
Isn't it sad?
You want to put your kid in the school?
Isn't it sad, Andrew, that's the world we live in?
But isn't it? It is. It's terrible. I had such a good childhood. I couldn't tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
We drank beer at all the, you know what I mean? We went and had a good time. We went to school. We got drunk, and we hung out with girls. That was my childhood, you know?
Mm.
These kids, they worry about getting shot, but we got to protect them. We can't fix society, you know? It's too big. That's too big a picture to fix society. That's already changed. But we got to make the kids safe. We can't fix society right now, tomorrow. Right? You got to get the kids safe, and it is sad. It's sad. I agree with you. But you can't put your kid in the school and like this with these crazies running around.
What about taking the AR-15s off the crazies? What about the fact that there are people in your country who have access to military-style semi-automatic rifles that fire, 45 rounds a minute? Isn't that part of the response too?
I'm not an expert on these, so I'm not going to talk to you about it because I'm focusing on just the schools, and I don't want anything to get twisted. That's not my agenda. Guns. I'm not a gun expert, so I can't answer. But all I know is that my daughter got killed in a school, and we need to make the school safer. I'm doing it for the kids. I'm on. I'm just aggravated, angry, and that's what's keeping me alive and going. And it's going to happen. I'm going to make a difference. The schools are going to be safe for these kids.
Andrew Pollock, whose daughter Meadow was killed in the Stoneman Douglas High School massacre last week, 5:26. A bloody big risk. That's how the Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones described the $1 billion fund for the regions when he formally launched it in Gisborne today. The first chunk of money out of the Provincial Growth Fund, just over $60 million, will be spent in Northland, Tairāwhiti East Coast, Hawke's Bay, Manawatu, Whanganui, and the west coast of the South Island. The initiatives include an $8 million injection for regional rail, which includes the return of the Napier to Wairoa rail line for logging trains. And of course more. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
It was a full house at the War Memorial Theatre in Gisborne with a lineup of senior ministers, including the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, her Deputy Winston Peters and Shane Jones.
A progressive government and a progressive style of policy needs to have the confidence and the courage to go into those provincial areas where historically governments have said if the market can't fix the problem, then perhaps the problem is insoluble. We do not accept that, and this $1 billion fund is dedicated to turning around the fortunes of the neglected, forgotten people of our provinces.
An independent advisory panel will consider a large number of the projects, but anything over and above the $20 million mark will need cabinet sign-off. The government acknowledges that with the $1 billion a year comes risk, but Jacinda Ardern says that's always the case with initiatives this big.
With ambition comes risk. With big, bold plans to make a real difference comes risk. It's all about how you manage that risk. I have utter faith that Minister Jones has set up the mechanisms we need to make sure that we achieve really robust investment in the provinces, but at a pace that the provinces deserve.
More than $8 million will be spent reopening the Wairoa-Napier line for logging trains, upgrading the Whanganui line for mainland locomotives carrying exports, and to fund feasibility studies for 3 further regional rail projects. The fund will also bankroll a feasibility study into moving the location of the ports of Auckland to Northport near Whangarei. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters, who campaigned on taking container and car import business further north, says it's a first step.
Well, there will be a Northport feasibility study, but there'll actually be, more importantly, a port study for the whole country. We need to have a smart maritime, road and rail transport system, and we should be using our best utilities, and we need to do that not with provincial bias applied to it, but with the national interest standard being applied, so that'll happen.
Mr Jones has also signalled some Landcorp land may be converted from dairy to forestry as part of the program to plant 1 billion trees.
Well, the board's got to make that call, but my view as the provincial minister is that we've got too many eggs in one basket. If Landcorp can diversify.
Mr Jones told regional mayors they had to meet the government halfway, but with $3 billion to spend over the next 3 years, he wants to act swiftly. Dave Cull, who heads local government New Zealand, says this is a great opportunity, but he says mayors have yet to see the criteria and how they'll be applied.
We don't want our members, for instance, misunderstanding the criteria or coming up with proposals that aren't completely developed with good business cases, so we don't want them to fail.
The Mayor of Northland and former National MP John Carter says the fund could have huge benefits for his region.
It's not just about economic development, but it's a major step forward to us addressing our social issues.
He says the work has to be done before even talking about moving Ports of Auckland to Northport.
And that's another option. We've got to do work on that. We can't, again, until we get the detail and proper business case. Those are the sorts of things that we need to go away and do some work on, and we are seriously working like hell on those sorts of things as we speak.
The fund also includes a new tourism hub for Kawakawa and a 2-year pilot to test the feasibility of establishing an indigenous totara wood industry in Northland. 2 new cycle trails will be built on the west coast, and a study on a waste-to-energy plant for Bulla will be carried out. In Gisborne for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Just before the headlines, Australia's embattled Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce says he will resign next Monday after weeks of damaging revelations over an affair with a staff member who is now pregnant with their child. Mr Joyce, the leader of the National Party, the junior partner in the ruling centre-right coalition, had earlier dismissed calls for him to quit. Today he was hit with yet more trouble when an allegation of sexual harassment against him was reported in West Australian newspapers. This afternoon he fronted the media for an announcement many had suspected was coming.
Over the last half a month, there's been a litany of allegations. I don't believe any of them have been sustained. A litany of allegations. And might I say right here that, as every person in any political party always says, the leaking, the backgrounding, all that, it'll destroy not our government, it'll destroy any government. And we work on the premise that what the National Party has done is so important. It is the reason that you have a coalition government, because at the last election we didn't lose a seat. In fact, we gained one. We did not lose a seat. We gained one. And by so doing, there was a coalition government. But to give these people in those regional and small towns the best opportunity, then this current cacophony of issues has to be put aside. And I think it's my responsibility to do my bit to make sure that it happens. Now, might I say, with the last allegation that was in the paper today, I have asked that be referred to the police. I've asked for the right of the person who's made the allegation, and I've asked for my right of defence that be referred to the police. But it's quite evident that you can't go to the dispatch box why issues like that surrounding. So I can't enter into any discussions about that. As you all understand, if it's going to be before the courts, it's going to be before the courts. But what I will say is that on Monday morning at the party room, I will step down as the leader of the National Party and Deputy Prime Minister of Australia.
Barnaby Joyce then went on to talk about the pressure he's been under during recent weeks.
I'd like to say that it's absolutely important, it's incredibly important that be a circuit breaker, not just for the Parliament, but more importantly, that it be a circuit breaker for Vicky, it'd be a circuit breaker for my unborn child, it'd be a circuit breaker for my daughters, and it'd be a circuit breaker for Nat. It's got to stop. This has got to stop, and it's not fair on them. It's just completely and utterly unwarranted, the sort of observation that's happened. If on a humorous side, I think it's got to stop for the poor buggers who parked outside my house every day. I think it's got to stop for them as well. They need to go home. But in all, on Monday morning, the whip, Michelle Landry, will have a meeting at 8 o'clock for the National Party, and I'll be stepping aside at that point.
It's Barnaby Joyce a short time ago. 26 to 6 coming up on Checkpoint. Kaikoura costs accounts, the costs of Cyclone Gita. State Highway 1 remains closed. Yep, it's closed again. A guilty verdict in the Renee Duckmanton murder trial in Christchurch. Who will National's new leader be? Do Amy Adams and Simon Bridges have the numbers? We call them. We'd love your feedback. You can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Nona next with business, but first Katrina with the headlines.
The supporters of Susan Austin cheered as a jury found her not guilty of assisted suicide in the High Court in Wellington this afternoon. The retired school teacher was also cleared of illegally importing pentobarbital. However, Austin was found guilty of providing the drugs which Anne-Marie Treadwell used to kill herself. Sentencing is set for May, but the defence asked Justice Thomas not to enter a conviction, suggesting they may seek a discharge without conviction. The chair of the Earthquake Commission, Sir Martin Weaver, says he's resigned because the minister responsible for the commission has no confidence in it. The Minister, Megan Woods, says it's unacceptable for 2,600 people to be still waiting for their claims to be resolved 7 years after the devastating Canterbury quakes. She says she'll send in an independent advisor. The National Party leader, Bill English, says the regions will be disappointed with the government's newly announced Provincial Growth Fund, which are just a rebrand of existing projects. In the first tranche of projects announced in Gisborne today, 5 regions will get a total of $60 million from the Fund for Tourism, Forestry, Rail and Road Initiatives. More than 10,000 New Plymouth properties should have water flowing from their taps tomorrow. The water has been cut off since storm damage broke a mains pipe earlier this week. 700 properties are also still without power in Taranaki. Australia's Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce is stepping down following weeks of damaging revelations over an affair with a staff member. Earlier today, a separate allegation of sexual harassment also emerged, and he says it's impossible to stay on while that's being investigated. The Deputy Sheriff on duty at the Florida school where 17 people were shot dead last week has resigned. He was earlier suspended because he stayed outside the school building during the attack. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now on Friday night. Hi, Nona. Kiwibank's half-year profit fell by a third, taking New Zealand Post's profit with it.
That's right.
It's a big odd fall. What caused it?
Well, a couple of things that were signalled before, and one of them is the scrapping of their IT system and replacing it. They had to get rid of it, and I don't know exactly what the problem was, but it was worth $224 million.
So it's a one-off cost, though, right?
Yeah, and so they had some quake costs as well, so that had an impact. And anyway, so overall, though, the company, which is owned by the people of New Zealand, either directly through New Zealand Post, but also through the Super Fund and the ACC. They're all shareholders in it. So their profit was down a third. That's to $44 million compared with $65 million the year before.
Yeah, it's a big old
It
whack.
is, yeah. And that had an impact on New Zealand Post because previously New Zealand Post owned Kiwibank, and that would have given them that profit. It didn't happen this time. So without the Kiwi Bank share, they would have made a loss of $13 million. In the end, they made a small profit of 6 months. And this is for a 6-month period ended in December for both the bank and New Zealand Post.
If they were one-off costs, Kiwibank is looking forward more optimistically for next year?
Yes, they are. That's right, because they've got a growth in loans and so on. So, yeah, it's still a bank. Banks make money. It's good.
They tend to, don't
That's a good thing.
Bless them.
But
He
New
says
Zealand Post is a little
facetiously.
different, because in that case, part of their problem is a fall in letter volume. So that really hurt their revenue. It fell 3%. Now, they had nearly 38 million fewer pieces of letters.
Holy moly.
And that's a lot. So they're saying that they need to kind of look at what they can do with that business because it's something that we're going to continue to see a decline. I was thinking to myself today, when was the last time anyone sent me a letter? I don't know. It was a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think the same thing.
Yes.
I'll write you one, Nona.
Oh, thank
Dear
you.
Nona.
Can you just put it in my box and I'll go, oh, yay, John sent me a letter. All right, that's it. So I really have little else to say about this.
That's a good result to report on. Thank you. A lot of
Yep.
public interest in that. How did the markets end the week?
Okay, so our top 50 index ended down 0.4%. That's 35 points up. Did I say up? Yes,
Yep.
I did. To 8,302. And the New Zealand dollar is steady at 73 cents US, 93.2 Australian, and 52.3 pence. And that's me for the week.
Fine work this week. Thanks, Nona. As always, have a great weekend.
And thank you.
Cheers. Let's go to the weather now with Met Service meteorologist John Law. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora. Well, a great start to the weekend. High pressure rebuilds back across New Zealand and it brings plenty of dry and fine weather. Highs in Auckland back to around about 25 degrees Celsius. Areas of cloud, but generally a fine looking day. We might catch an isolated shower out towards the likes of Tauranga, up in towards the Bay of Plenty, but for much of the North Island, it's a dry day. Bit more cloud perhaps on those western facing coasts, but really a fine looking story. And even down in towards the capital, a great looking day. Plenty of fine weather. Just watch out for the winds as we head through the rest of Saturday and also through towards Sunday for Wellington. Highs there though, 23 degrees Celsius. There's plenty of sun also down that eastern coast of the North Island. Highs in Gisborne back to 25 degrees Celsius. Again, a little bit more cloud towards Palmerston North, but generally a fine looking day there. And for most of the South Island as well, there's plenty of dry weather in store. Decent spells of sunshine, areas of cloud from time to time, and highs in Christchurch of about 22 degrees Celsius. A little bit more cloud later in the day though for the likes of Dunedin and Invercargill, and we have got some wetter weather pushing through for Sunday, but for Saturday, many spots staying dry and highs around about 20 degrees Celsius. And that's it from me.
Thanks, John. Have a great weekend. State Highway 1 north and south of poor old Kaikoura. Gosh, it's having a bad run of luck. And the railway alongside State Highway 1 are likely to be shut until at least the middle of next week after they were blocked by slips. This week's storm brought down 300,000 cubic metres of rock and soil, blocking the coastal highway in 60 places. Remember, it had only just been unblocked after the earthquake. The closures are affecting local businesses which were already affected by the earthquake. Katie Scotcher reports.
Daniel Jenkins runs Kaikoura Cheese, a small family business. This summer's been busy, but now their shop is empty.
We just don't have anyone turning up in town, and this time of year is when we're making our income. We don't make a lot through winter, so it makes it really difficult and puts more pressure on to the following season to dig ourselves out of the hole that we've been trying to dig ourselves out of since the earthquake.
Kaikoura Mayor Winston Gray says prior to the slips, up to 5,000 cars were travelling on the highway every day. He says the closures are having a negative impact on the town's economy.
The numbers on that road are strong, so that's the impact we're getting. They're just not buying the fuel here. They're not stopping off those bits and bytes. It will take a lot of money out of the economy. You know, the main not being a state highway anymore until next week. You know, the flow of traffic's just not coming through, so that affects things. There's no doubt about it.
The massive quake in November 2016 damaged the state highway. It only reopened in December, and now the only way in or out of Kaikoura is via the difficult and longer inland route. NZTA spokesperson Tim Crow says the recently repaired highway held up pretty well, given ex-tropical cyclone Gita brought 28% of the town's annual rainfall in a single day.
This type of event is an extreme event. You know, the last time we saw this intensity of rainfall over a 12-hour period was 1975, and that brought down 83 slips in this area as well. So it is a rare event, but the good news is the infrastructure we're putting in is making it more and more resilient.
The train line was also covered by the slips. Kiwi Rail Group Manager Todd Moyle says they've had to cancel 4 trains a day.
So it has a pretty significant impact. We're obviously disappointed after all the effort that went into getting it opened at the end of last year to be in this position now. But the teams are doing everything they possibly can. I think with such an extreme event, even prior to the earthquake, I think we would have seen quite an extensive amount of damage.
Both NZTA and Kiwi Rail say they'll have a better idea on Monday of when the road and rail line will reopen. Back at Kaikoura Cheese, Daniel Jenkins is hoping that it will happen in time for a final summer rush of tourists. For Checkpoint, Katie Scotcher.
17 to 6. The family of slain Christchurch woman Renee Duckmanton cried and applauded as Sani Marong was found guilty of her murder at the High Court in Christchurch today. The 33-year-old Gambian-born butcher strangled Renee Duck-Manton, a 22-year-old he'd picked up for sex in May 2016. She was working as a sex worker at the time. Her badly burnt body was found on Main Rakaya Road in Southbridge the next day. Maya Burry reports.
They were also told in the weeks leading up to the murder, Morong searched online what kidnappers use to make someone unconscious, and he accessed an article called How to Kidnap a Girl, an Informative Guide. Over the course of the 2-week trial, the jury was told Morong purchased about 2 litres of petrol from a service station, which he used to set Ms Duck-Manton's body on fire. They were also told in the weeks leading up to the murder, Morong searched online what kidnappers use to make someone unconscious, and he accessed an article called How to Kidnap a Girl, an Informative Guide. In his closing comments to the jury, the judge presiding over the case, Justice Mander, summarised both the Crown and Defence's cases. He said the Crown prosecutor, Pip Curry, submitted they had proved beyond reasonable doubt that when Morong strangled Ms Duck-Manton to death, he had murderous intent.
He admitted in evidence when conducting the internet searches that he wanted to know how certain crimes were committed, and he agreed with the proposition put to him that at the time he was browsing the internet making these searches, he did intend to kill. That admission Ms Curry submitted needs to be contrasted with his other evidence that when he, by his own admission, strangled Ms Duck-Manton in his vehicle, he had no such intention to kill and just wanted to shut her up.
Morong gave evidence in his defence during the trial and said his declining mental health caused him to become fixated with sex workers in Christchurch's red light district on Manchester Street, where he would drive to up to 10 times a day. Justice Mander said the defence's case was that Morong did not deny killing Ms Duck-Manton, but he denied it was murder, claiming he was mentally imbalanced.
The defence case is that you should believe Mr Morong when he gave evidence that he did not intend to attack Ms Duck-Manton, and that his assault of her, his placing of his hands around her neck, was a reaction to her screaming and him wanting the noise to stop. The defence case is that Mr Morong did not intend to kill Ms Duck-Manton. It was submitted by Mr Krebs that Mr Morong did not have the necessary mental element of a murderous intent.
But the jury didn't believe Morong. It took them only 50 minutes to deliberate on their decision before finding him guilty of murder. Speaking to media after the verdict, Detective Inspector Daryl Sweeney said the case had been harrowing for everyone involved and the right result had been achieved.
It won't provide closure nor solace for Renee's family, but it is important for everybody that they have answers and someone's been held to account. Renee's family would like everyone to remember her as a much-loved daughter, sister, cousin, granddaughter and auntie. She will always remain a much-loved part of the family.
Saini Morong showed no emotion as the guilty verdict was read. He will reappear for sentencing in the High Court in Christchurch in April. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
Who will be the next leader of the National Party? And will that same person lead the National Party into the next election? Next Tuesday, the National Caucus will vote for a new leader and deputy. Sources have told Checkpoint Amy Adams and Simon Bridges, as a combo, if they can make that work, have the numbers and have discussed supporting each other as leader. So where does that leave the other contenders? Our producer, Bridget Burke, phoned around to find out.
I'm Simon Bridges, leader of the National Party.
I'm Amy Adams. I have the privilege of leading the New Zealand National Party.
I'm Judith Collins. I'm the leader of the National Party, and my position as leader of the National Party has been voted on by the caucus as well. A lot of input from the members and supporters.
Well, I can't yet because I'm not.
Stephen Joyce, leader of the National Party. How does that sound?
Well, that's certainly what I'm aiming for on Tuesday.
4 of the 5 contenders for the National Party leadership. The 5th, Mark Mitchell, declined to be interviewed, but here's his colleague Stephen Joyce. What's Mark Mitchell like?
Good guy.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
You'd work closely with him?
I work closely with all of them.
Yeah.
And have and will.
And here's Simon Bridges.
I think Mark's a nice guy.
So, 4 days out from Tuesday's caucus vote, who has the numbers? Checkpoint understands Christchurch's Amy Adams and Tauronga's Simon Bridges have been working closely together and, between them, have the 29 votes needed for one to become leader, with the other a consideration as deputy.
Well, the discussions that Simon and I have had have been along the lines that whoever wins the race, and if it's one of us, as between the two of us, we will both work very hard and fully in support of the new leader. Exactly what position that might be in, we haven't agreed, we haven't resolved, we haven't even attempted to resolve, but we've both committed to each other. If Simon's the leader, he has my full and unequivocal backing. And if I'm the leader, I know that I will have his full and unequivocal backing, because as a party, we all know that if we're going to win, and that is our goal, we have to do it as a unified team. We have all had that message absolutely hardwired into us.
Oh, I think that's right. I think the reality is that, I have a huge regard for Amy Adams and the other candidates there as well. I know that at the end of this process, there will be a leader. I hope it's me. I'm putting myself forward for that reason. I want to be leader of the National Party.
I think that both Simon Bridges and I represent the right blend of experience and yet renewal for the party. And as I said, if he wins, I've said to him, I want to be part of his senior team and be right in behind him.
There are no fixed rules within the National Party constitution about how the leadership vote takes place, but it's understood it will be a knockout. Caucus members will vote for one of the 5 candidates. If none of them get more than 50% support, or 29 votes, the lowest ranked is knocked out and another round of voting takes place until one candidate gets majority support. The same goes for the deputy leadership. Former Finance Minister Stephen Joyce is confident about next week's vote, despite not having a running mate.
Amy Adams has told me that her and Simon Bridges have had numerous discussions about that, and they've agreed that they would both be happy to serve under each other.
Well, actually, all the candidates have had discussions, but I'm not going to be sharing those. I mean, obviously, you'll have to vouch for your conversations, but I've had discussions with both Amy and Simon.
If Simon Bridges and Amy Adams do have the numbers, Judith Collins doesn't want to know about it.
I'm not aware of anybody selling themselves as a combo, and I believe that this is a position of leadership. It is not actually a combo. A combo is something we might have in a fast food restaurant.
Can you please use a word to describe Amy Adams?
I think she is hardworking.
OK. What makes Paula Bennett such a good deputy leader?
I think she's very approachable.
Does a good deputy leader make a good leader?
Sometimes.
We asked the 4 candidates where the Labour government is vulnerable.
Look, I think they're vulnerable in terms of their lack of cohesion, that they are 3 parties with very different views on actually many, many things. Over 9 years in opposition, these parties haven't done the groundwork to have a program that makes a difference for New Zealand.
They're absolutely vulnerable on their competence and ability to deliver on the highfalutin and grandiose promises they've made to this country. They've shown no signs of having either the team, the talent, the plan, or the comprehension of what it's going to take to live up to what they've talked about. And I think that's going to become very clear to New Zealand very quickly.
They're vulnerable because of the government. They weren't ready for office. They have a lot of things they don't know what they actually want to do, and the things they do want to do, frankly, will take New Zealand backwards.
They're actually vulnerable on several fronts. But if you consider what Labour has as its biggest advantage, it is the fact that it has Jacinda Ardern as the Prime Minister. She is a formidable opponent, an opponent who should never be underestimated and who has been underestimated in the past. And she has been able to cobble together a government, as all coalition governments are, pretty much cobbled together. And she is the person who has to be held to account for doing her job for New Zealanders, the job she is paid to do.
So who has the numbers?
Look, I'm doing well. Obviously, we don't talk about those sort of things. It's not the done thing, but I feel good about it. I feel I'm continuing to pick up momentum as this has gone on for nearly 2 weeks. Like anything, I can't count my chickens, but I go in, feeling optimistic and ready to give it my absolute best on Tuesday morning when the final votes are held.
I'm not talking about who's got what numbers. I think there's still everything to play for in that race. Each of us are out there talking to our colleagues, getting as many votes in support of our own candidacy as we can. And as at right now, there's certainly no deal in place with me and any of the other leadership contenders.
And I don't know that I'd see any of them as a threat. I think it's a good contest, and we'll find out the answer on Tuesday.
How many votes have you got?
I have a substantial number of votes, and what we're not doing is releasing any of those, because until those are voted on Tuesday, there are no votes.
Complete the sentence. New Zealanders are
a wonderful, resourceful, inventive people, which I'm very proud to have been a part of a government leading them for the last 9 years. And I think if we get the policies right from a government perspective, we can have a wonderful time ahead of us because of that talent, that inventiveness.
Decent, hard-working and fair.
New Zealanders are
the most aspirational group of people, I think, at heart that you could come across. We are innovative, we are successful beyond what on many measures we could or should be, and we recognise the incredible beauty of the country we live in. And I think every single New Zealander wants to have the best for their family, their children, their grandchildren, and wants to continue to have New Zealand being not only an incredibly beautiful place, but a prosperous and fair place.
Complete the sentence. New Zealanders are
a fantastic group of people.
An announcement on who will be National's new leader is expected on Tuesday afternoon. For Checkpoint, I'm Bridget Burke.
Thank you, Bridget, and we will indeed cover that on Tuesday. A 72-year-old former music teacher at one of the country's most prestigious schools has been jailed for historic sex offending. Trevor Ian Gibbs gave a brief bow to the judge and groaned as he was led into the cells at Manukau District Court today after being sentenced to 6 years in prison. Our court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
Trevor Gibbs's victim had his teenage years taken away from him. Gibbs groomed him during their private one-on-one lessons at Whanganui Collegiate before sexually abusing him. Today the man directly addressed Gibbs and told the elderly man of the damage he'd done. His words are voiced by an actor to protect his identity.
For me personally, it started in a music lesson in a boarding school that my parents had sent me to in the hope of a better education, where you were the music teacher. An adult married with 2 children, and I was a 13-year-old prepubescent boy. From that day onwards, my life entirely changed.
Gibbs took care in choosing the places where he would abuse the boy, including his locked office and even the attic space above the office.
You knew I'd remain silent, and without conscience you manipulated my life at the school further to ensure you could continue to take advantage of me.
He said he believed counselling and the support of friends and family had helped him move on from the awful experience.
However, through the duration of these legal proceedings, memories which I had long suppressed came back with an alarming clarity, and on hearing the guilty verdict in December, it flooded over just how much this guilty verdict meant to me and how much the experience at school is still very much part of my life.
The man also had a message for Gibbs.
For you, I can only hope that you use this time to come to face who you are and acknowledge to yourself the damage and detrimental effects, not only on me and my family, but also on those of your children and your own family.
The Crown Prosecutor, Jasper Rhodes, argued against Gibbs getting any discount for his contributions to the community as a music teacher and performer.
The defendant abused his position at the school. He abused his disparity of power between himself and the victim. It was through that position, through the position he'd put himself in and through his respected position, that he was able to continue offending in this way.
Mr. Rhodes said it was the imbalance of power that enabled Gibbs's offending to go unreported for so long. Gibbs's lawyer, Annabelle Maxwell-Scott, said the offending dated back decades, and now the court was dealing with a different man who posed little or no threat to society.
He was a regular performer, contributed to the society in a wider way in the church, in his running of the cafes, and clearly from all the references before the court, one can see that he has, in some people's eyes and in most people's eyes, contributed to society. And he's clearly a talented musician, was a talented teacher. And in my submission, it would be harsh for the court to ignore the last 40 years of that.
Miss Maxwell-Scott said Gibbs's family had been torn apart by the offending. Judge Richard McElraith said Gibbs had no insight into his offending and continued to deny any responsibility.
The victim here was a young man at boarding school, away from home and away from the supportive environments that may otherwise have been expected. There was a significant breach of trust. You were a teacher, a confidant, He was a young pupil.
Judge McElraith said another aspect was the length of the offending, over several years.
As also was the premeditated and manipulative nature of that offending, also as detailed by the victim. Finally, of course, there is the serious emotional harm.
He said he had to sentence Gibbs according to the law as it was at the time of the offending, when sex offending against young people carried lighter sentences. The judge decided not to increase Gibbs's sentence for his previous convictions for sexually offending against 2 boys in the 1970s. He took some time off Gibbs's sentence for his age, medical conditions and the contribution he'd made to society. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Edward Gayahau.
About a minute before 6, lots of feedback coming in on Andrew Pollock. He was the dad who lost his daughter Meadow in the shooting in the Florida high school. He went to see Donald Trump in the White House and said, "I'm pissed." It was a grab that went everywhere, really, that people watch television in countries where they cover American politics. We interviewed him. He's unusual because he's a Republican, a really big Trump supporter. Most of the narrative post the shooting at the high school has been anti-guns, pro-gun control, anti-NRA, pretty driven by the youngsters in that school. Whereas Andrew Pollock is not talking about guns, he's talking about security. And Paul Lecomte kind of summed up what you're saying. He's hurting, but he's also wrong. People pretty kind in their response to him because he's lost his daughter. But Andrew from Christchurch said, "Hi John, well I have the deepest sympathy for Andrew Pollock for losing his daughter. He and many Americans have their head in the sand about guns and gun control. Sadly, unless they introduce radical reform in gun control and pushback against the NRA, there will be more mass shootings in schools and elsewhere." Most of you sending feedback along those lines. Thank you for being in touch.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A euthanasia advocate who's been cleared of involvement in another woman's suicide says she's heartened by the support she's received. Susan Austin has also been found not guilty of illegally importing pentobarbital. However, the jury in the High Court in Wellington today found her guilty on 2 other counts related to importing the drug, which Anne-Marie Treadwell used to kill herself. Outside the court, Ms Austin thanked her supporters.
I feel absolutely delighted. It's a glorious sunny day in Wellington and very lucky. I'm so fortunate to have my gorgeous husband and my son, one of my sons here, and all the supporters who've come from all around the world to be here to support me, and it's great.
Susan Austin says she was shaking when the verdict was read out and is relieved it's over. The government is concerned about the number of unresolved claims from the Canterbury earthquakes has led to the resignation of the Earthquake Commission's chair. Sir Martin Weavers, a former chief executive of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, has chaired EQC since 2013. Here's our political reporter May Heron.
Sir Martin says it's clear the minister has no confidence in the board and staff, so he's stepping aside to allow her to appoint someone she thinks can do a better job. He acknowledges that mistakes have been made, but he says he's leaving with great regret. Ms Woods says it's unacceptable that 2,600 people still have unresolved claims after 7 years, and next week the government will appoint an independent advisor to speed up the process. From Parliament, May Heron.
A Kaipara man will serve 4 months community detention for a crash that killed his wife, daughter and a family friend near Bailey's Beach in June 2016. Russell Stewart, who's 49, has also been disqualified from driving for a year after admitting 3 charges of careless driving causing death and 4 of causing injury. Members of Dargaville's Brethren community packed the Whangarei District Court for the sentencing. Stewart was originally also charged with drink driving and fleeing the scene of the crash. The court heard that the Crown offered last month to drop those charges if he pleaded guilty to the others, and the offer was accepted. Judge De Ridder said Stewart had drunk alcohol earlier that afternoon, but he set that aside as a factor in the crash. He said Stewart had shown deep remorse and had no previous convictions. Australia's embattled Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce is quitting. He announced an hour ago that he will resign on Monday after weeks of damaging revelations over an affair with a staff member who's now pregnant. Earlier today, a complaint of sexual harassment also emerged, and he says it's impossible for him to stay on while that's being investigated. ABC political reporter Anna Henderson says the circumstances around how the complaint made it into the media are unclear.
Mr Joyce said that it was that complaint being made public in the paper which for him led to, or partly led to today's decision. What's interesting is that the ABC has heard from that woman's lawyer, and that woman's lawyer has told the ABC that she in fact never wanted this complaint to be made public. She made the complaint not to the police but to the National Party in the hopes that it would be resolved internally.
Anna Henderson in Canberra. Universities are blaming the government's zero fee policy for higher enrolment costs, but little to no increase in their student numbers. The policy covers 1 year of tuition fees for all students enrolling in a tertiary course for the first time this year. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Free fees were introduced in a hurry after the government took office late last year. Universities say they've had to change their IT systems, and their staff have spent more time advising students about their eligibility for the scheme. They say that in return they're seeing little payoff. Some say their enrolments are the same as last year, while others say theirs are up only slightly, and it's too early to know if the free fee policy is the reason. The government says it has no plans to reimburse institutions for the cost of introducing the policy. Ko John Gerritsen Tēnei.
A family court judge's minutes released this afternoon shows Wairarapa social workers are being diverted from frontline work to finish reports. The area manager of Oranga Tamariki was summoned before Judge Katrina Doyle last Monday to explain why a crucial report about a young girl was long overdue. Judge Doyle says the manager confirmed that significant staffing issues are causing widespread delays. This affects several reports from last year and 5 reports from this year. Oranga Tamariki has promised to prioritise any additional report needed in the case that triggered the summons. It's 6:05. To sport, and the Crusaders are out to create another Super Rugby dynasty when they kick off their season this weekend. The defending champions won the title for an 8th time last year after an 8-year drought. They play the Chiefs in Christchurch tomorrow night, and coach Scott Robertson, beginning his 2nd year in charge, says the goal is simple.
A few coaches have backed it up. Just your mindset, it's got to be that way. I've got a great squad, mate. I've got a good group of guys who are really keen, passionate, love what they do, and they love what they did last year, and love to do it again. You know, those memories that you make are fair for life. So this year's got to be special again.
Scott Robertson. The Highlanders host the Blues in Game 1 of the season in Dunedin tonight. The New Zealand men's basketball side have a tough assignment tonight away to China as part of their World Cup qualifying series. The Tall Blacks have already played 2 qualifying games, losing to South Korea and defeating Hong Kong. Coach Paul Henare admits their build-up hasn't been ideal, having had just 2 days to bring together players from New Zealand, Australia, Israel and Germany.
In the past, limited preparation time has sort of been a week to 2 weeks. Now we have 1 to 2 days of legitimate practice time, but I feel like we're better prepared than what we were in November.
Paul Henare. And Olympic gold medalist Lisa Carrington has collected her 9th New Zealand K1 200 metres title in the National Canoe Sprint Championships at Lake Karapiro today. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, how the Grateful Dead inspired Harvard professor Dan Nocera's extraordinary scientific ambitions. Austin Eubanks survived the 1999 Columbine High School massacre. 13 killed, the worst high school shooting in US history back then. Nearly 20 years on, he talks about the damage done. And Richard Hall is a hunter, also a scientist and a writer. It's hunting that makes him feel like himself. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods and a few showers, mainly about the coasts. Auckland, Waikato and Taupo, cloudy periods and isolated showers, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taumarunui, Taihape and the east from Gisborne to Wairarapa. Fine apart from a few showers about the ranges of Gisborne, clearing tomorrow evening. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha, fine apart from isolated showers about the ranges this afternoon. Clutha and Southland, cloudy periods and a few showers, retreating to Stewart Island tomorrow morning and becoming fine elsewhere. there. Cloud increasing again tomorrow evening. Bulla and Westland, long fine spells and a few showers. Cloud increasing tomorrow evening. Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers, turning to rain tomorrow evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing later tomorrow. It's exactly 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina. Those long fine spells will be very welcome on the West Coast, won't they?
They certainly will. One day I'm going to read a forecast that says for the whole of New Zealand, fine weather. That's what I want to read one day.
Yep, the land of the long white cloud.
Yep, maybe. Or just cloudy. Something like that.
Thank you very much, Katrina Batten. Have a lovely weekend.
You too.
There were gusts of relief this afternoon from the supporters of a euthanasia advocate who was cleared of helping another woman commit suicide. Retired school teacher Susan Austin was charged with assisting Anne-Marie Treadwell to take her own life and several charges of importing the Class C controlled drug pentobarbital into New Zealand. Austin was found guilty on 2 counts relating to importing the drug, which Ms Treadwell used to kill herself. There were cheers as Susan Austin emerged from the High Court in Wellington after the verdict, and she spoke to reporters.
I feel absolutely delighted. It's a glorious sunny day in Wellington and very lucky. I'm so fortunate to have my gorgeous husband and my son, one of my sons here, and all the supporters who've come from all around the world to be here to support me, and it's great. And I'm so thrilled. I'm going to go home and have a lovely relaxing weekend.
Describe the moment that the verdict was read.
I was almost in awe. I was shaking, and then I'm so relieved and rejoicing that it's over. Well, that part's over.
Do you have a message for all the people who've stood by you through all of this?
I love them, and they love me. I got a letter today to court here from a lady that I've never heard of, a Mary in Lower Hutt, saying she's a supporter. Never heard of her in my life. Wonderful.
And will you carry on being a member of Exit International?
I'll talk about that later. Okay, thank you so much.
That outside the court just after the verdicts, just looking at the weather, we were talking about long fine spells on the West Coast, a little bit of sun, a little bit of rain as well, but sun there. Tasman, Nelson, Golden Bay, the weather forecast is fantastic for drying out after Gita. Tomorrow is one great big yellow sun and a high of 24. Farmers in Golden Bay are counting the cost of former cyclone Gita, which caused flooding across much of the land at the top of the Takaka Valley. Shirley Rosser, whose family has 550 dairy cows on a farm in the area, has spent the day pulling muck out of hundreds of metres of fencing so it can be fixed. She told our reporter Logan Church that it's likely to cost thousands to repair all the damage.
We've been very, very busy cleaning up the mess, as you can see from this, and a lot of fences damaged or flattened, posts ripped out, wire all over the farm. One water trough got shifted, and the first day there was 8 of us cleaning up, and we've still got days and days of work here yet, fixing fences and cleaning up rubbish.
When was the last time you saw damage like this done by essentially a storm, or a flood rather?
2 years ago, Easter time, Good Friday, was a big flood then, not quite as big as this one, and that did a lot of damage too, a lot of rubbish on fences and flattened fences, and ripped out laneways that the cows walk on to go to the shed. I got sent to town the other day to get more staples and fencing gear, and they're getting more posts in today, and yeah, it is quite expensive, and paying extra people to come and help clean up, and that's farming for you, and we just got to accept it and get on and clean it up.
That was Shirley Rosser, a farmer in Takaka Valley, being very pragmatic and matter-of-fact about what is required, talking to our reporter Logan Church. The National Party leader Bill English says regions were promised a bonanza by the government, and he expects they will be disappointed by the Provincial Growth Fund. Now, we covered the Growth Fund earlier in the program. Jane Patterson, our political editor, filed on it, but it was launched by the government today, $1 billion a year fund, which is part of the coalition agreement between Labor and New Zealand First. Launched in Gisborne, 5 regions will receive just over $60 million, and the first chunk of money, $5 million, will go to Kiriwell to reopen the Wairoa to Napier Line, north of Napier obviously, for logging trains. But speaking to our reporters in Auckland, well, speaking to reporters generally in Auckland, not just ours, National Party leader Bill English says he doesn't think the money will make much of a difference to the regions.
I think the regions will be disappointed. The government raised very high expectations of a bonanza for regional development. I think the biggest project in here is a $9 million roundabout, and rebranding a whole lot of existing programs.
You must be able to concede, though, that perhaps re-establishing the Wairoa train link to Gisborne is a significant sort of start, though?
Well, it's not going to have much impact on the region. Look, it'll help get a few logging trucks off the road, but I think people were expecting a lot more, like the reopening of the railway line all the way to Napier. Look, some of these programs will work, but I think the scale of them is much smaller than people imagined. They'll get a few trees planted, they'll get 1 or 2 roading projects done, but the regions were sold a bonanza. They were told $1 billion a year. I think they'll be looking for the buzz, and they've got a bit of a whimper.
Bill English, who was the leader of the National Party until Tuesday. Who was it? T.S. Eliot. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang but a whimper. Was that Eliot? Anyway, universities are unhappy. The government's zero fee policy for tertiary students has increased their administration costs in exchange for little to no change in their enrolments. The 8 universities are reopening for the year, and though some are reporting an uptake in enrolments, they say it's too early to know that what's exactly going on, whether it's due to the progressive rollout of zero fees. They say many students have been confused about the Labour Party flagship policy, which was introduced late last year, and staff have had to spend extra time explaining it. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
At the University of Waikato, enrolments from school leavers are very slightly up on last year, and the number of older students applying for the first time has also increased. But the Senior Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Alistair Jones, says it's too early to tell if the free fees policy is responsible.
Our applications were up overall, but it would be hard to say that is to do with the fees. Students are applying for more universities now at the initial stages, so it's hard to know whether they've enrolled for 1 university, 2 universities or 3 universities and then taking up one of those. So it's very hard for us to tell at this stage.
The policy for 3 free years of tertiary study is being progressively rolled out. This year, first-time tertiary students are eligible for 1 free year of education or training up to the value of $12,000. Alistair Jones says it's been confusing for some students, and university staff have had to spend more time providing advice.
There's been some confusion about who is eligible, what they need to apply for from a study link point of view. We found some students were delaying their, if you like, enrolment because they were unsure whether they actually had to enrol with the free fees. So I think there has been some uncertainty.
The University of Canterbury reported in November that enrolments for this year were up about 10%, double the level it had expected prior to the policy. Its Vice-Chancellor, Rod Carr, says it looks like the university will have more students this year than in 2017, but it's not clear if that's because of the free fees.
It appears that more Christchurch high school leavers are choosing to stay in the city. It does appear that we've got more students coming from the North Island, both from Auckland and Wellington, and it does look like we've done a better job at converting expressions of interest by full fee-paying international students into actual enrolments at the university.
At AUT in Auckland, the Vice-Chancellor Derek McCormick says there's been no impact on enrolments, but the university is facing increased admin costs.
We've had to take on staff. It has been more complex. We are hoping that we will receive some compensation for that, and we're waiting to know the outcome of that. But it has been more complex and has involved us having more staff on during the enrolment period.
And Pamela Moss from the biggest university, Auckland, says there's been no increase in enrolments, but fees free has caused significant costs, especially in IT.
At the end of January, we had spent 300 IT hours to deal with this. I expect that we have probably spent at least another 100 hours, and then all of the ongoing cost where we would otherwise have been doing something else, and we're having to deal with just the management of this process.
But universities hoping for a top-up to help meet the costs of introducing the free fees policy look to be out of luck. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says there are no plans to reimburse institutions for their costs. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
We were just discussing, we're all a bit over the weekend here. It's 70 minutes past 6 and it's Friday night and everyone's just going, oh boy. And so is your feedback. It's really nutty tonight, excellently nutty tonight. Some of it's so excellently nutty that I simply can't read it out. There is one that is just hilarious. And I reckon that in about 147 years I'll be allowed to, We'll be allowed to, whoever is here in 147 years will be able to read that on Radio New Zealand. But in the meantime, just use your imagination. Someone asked, why are we listening to Bill? Well, he's still leader of the National Party. That's pretty brutal. He's leader until Tuesday. Someone else is being rude about Simon Bridges. Someone else is being rude about us. Someone else is being rude about stink bugs. Fair enough, they deserve it. Lots of people being kind, but also rejecting the argument of Andrew Pollock, whose daughter Meadow died in that shooting, the Florida massacre. And basically he's saying it's not about gun control, it's about security at schools. Gutting to hear the father of a school shooting victim on the program saying you can't fix society shows how deeply flawed the psyche of the US truly is. And as I was listening to the head of the NRA on Morning Report this morning, I couldn't help feeling exactly that. Wow, a lot of this stuff is very dark. Some of your feedback, though, is very funny, but in a Chaucerian way. Right, 18.5 minutes past 6. It's the controversial marina that could bring the super yachts of the super rich to Waiheke Island. A lot of rich people over on Waiheke Island now. By golly, that demographic's changing. But the proposal has not only divided Waihekeans, but prompted a challenge to the Environment Court. The 186th berth marina, complete with floating car park and yacht club at Kennedy Point, has been granted consent by the Auckland Council. But the group Save Kennedy Point says the marina is elitist and would ruin the quiet little bay. Rowan Quinn took a visit to the island.
I enjoy it out here, you know, and I spend a lot of time out here, and just beyond here is where I go fishing, and I do quite well. And it's a really nice spot for people to come and enjoy, and it's one of the most idyllic spots on the whole island. It never chops up rough, and yeah, really nice for locals to enjoy, and I think locals are really going to miss out.
Bill Baldwin's about to take the dinghy back to his small yacht at Kennedy Point Bay. He regularly moors here, sleeping among the gentle waves smack bang where the marina is proposed. He's not into it for plenty of reasons.
It's up and down here, I see a lot of little blue penguins, and I can't see them sticking around after construction. And I really like the area the way it is. I'm really concerned about the floating car park aspect of it. And even if, I mean, I've got a boat out here, there's no way I'd ever be able to afford to be on a marina. It'll be pretty much for rich people only.
Bill's boat's one of about 20 little yachts bobbing around their moorings in the small bay with its Pohutakawa-lined Pebble Beach. Bill isn't part of the Save Kennedy Point group, but he shares their view, as do the many Waiheke Islanders who've collectively donated $200,000 to a grassroots campaign to fund the court battle. The group's founder, Thomas Grieve, says the developer's plans are simply too much for the peaceful little spot.
We're looking at a floating car park with up to 72 cars, where also there'll be two-storey buildings, a supposed plaza where people will be able to hop off and swim, much like you can do at the moment off the beach. And then breakwaters, which are about 470 metres long, half a kilometre long of breakwaters.
On the developer's website, the mock-up of the Swedish-designed marina looks pretty swish. Its borders mimicking the shape of the bay, framed by bush-covered cliffs, with a few boats well spaced out in the berths. But don't be fooled, says Save Kennedy Point's legal officer, Sebastian Cassie.
What they want to do is take up about almost 8 hectares of our beautiful bay. And looking out at that, that's a huge amount of space that they want to take away from the public, and give that over to people who, you know, just a select few people.
The bay's not undeveloped. It's home to a very low-key car ferry terminal and has a row of houses that look down on it through the native bush on the cliffs. In the comparatively bustling Waiheke town centre of Oniroa, not everyone minds the thought of a marina. Kennedy Point resident Bill Short's one of them.
I don't have particularly strong views about it. I mean, there's a lot of boats anchored in Putiki Bay anyway, and I think if, you know, you have a nice marina there, they control the noise, it could actually be a good place for people in this region to go to, and possibly in the future, dare I say it, another place for a regular ferry service.
Waiheke and Jane Scory isn't so sure the island needs to make it easier for visitors.
You know, it's just making our island, you know, just something else
on the island that's going to make it busier. And it's busier enough at the moment.
But Colin doesn't know why the marina is causing all this fuss.
Well, I think we should have one.
How come?
Every island in the world's got one. Why shouldn't we have one?
So the opponents are saying that it would spoil the beautiful natural landscape down there. And
well, a lot of crock. There's lots of people who have boats, and they're just as entitled as everybody else to have something that they want.
Save Kennedy Point's Sebastian Cassie says this Monday's court battle is a David and Goliath one.
We're a lot of Davids against a Goliath who I hope halfway through the trial will kind of have a big gulp in his throat and go, goodness, they're not hippies, they're not people who don't want progress, they're just people who really care about what's important.
The developers, Kennedy Point Boat Harbour Limited, say media coverage about the marina's been unfair. However, they wouldn't talk to RNZ, saying they'd prefer to have their say in court. In Waiheke Island for Checkpoint, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
Well, let's leave Waiheke Island and head south to the town of Wanaka, which is buzzing after two of their own became New Zealand's first Winter Olympics medalists in 26 years. 16-year-olds Zoe Sadowski-Synnott and Nico Porteous both won bronze in their respective events yesterday in South Korea. We received a delightful text from Zoe's geography teacher at Mount Aspiring College last night saying how proud they were, not only that she won bronze, but that she got NCEA Level 2 merit endorsed, having attended only 30% of her classes, which is pretty impressive. Our Otago Southern reporter Timothy Brown with the story of Zoe and Nico from Wanaka.
That's the sound of more than 500 Mount Aspiring College pupils watching this.
A massive switch backside 900 and puts that down.
A fellow pupil, Year 13, Zoe Sadowski-Synnott, breaking New Zealand's 26-year Winter Olympics medal drought. Then, a few hours later, another Wanaka local, Nico Porteous, captured the country's second medal. Today, the pupils, the school, in fact the whole town, is still buzzing. Queenstown Lakes Deputy Mayor and Wanaka resident Callum McLeod summed up the mood.
You could probably sum it up in one word, and it's wahoo! Huge for Wanaka, huge for the district, and huge for New Zealand. It's fantastic. Couldn't be prouder.
And Zoe's friends at Mount Aspiring feel the same way.
I'm just so proud. I don't even have the words to describe how proud I am, but yeah, it's pretty cool to be her friend.
I think it's pretty awesome that she's worked so hard for this and she's finally done it. I was so proud of her because before she even went into it, I knew that she was going to do so well, and she just trained so hard, and I was so happy for her.
When she did her run, we knew she was in third. We just felt so proud. She's just put so much time and effort into it, and she just deserves it. It's crazy, and it just shows how committed she is and how hard she's worked to get there. And it's just such a natural thing for her now, snowboarding, so it's just really great to see her talent being shown off on the world stage.
The tight-knit group of friends say they've known Zoe since primary school. Mel Telford says the big win won't change her.
So cool to watch Zoe just from Wanaka compete against girls from all over the world and then finish off in third place. You kind of gain appreciation of the sport when you watch someone compete.
Right, and to you, she is just Zoe from Wanaka?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she'll always be. It's not going to go to her head, you don't think?
No, it's not going to go to her head. She'll always just be Zoe from Wanaka.
Maggie Little says Zoe's talent was obvious from a very young age.
I used to ski a little bit with her because I quite like skiing, so it's cool to see her. She was always really talented and always would blow me away how good she was, so she deserves it, definitely.
Mount Aspiring College principal Wayne Bosley says while Nico doesn't attend the school, he keeps a similar circle of friends to Zoe, and it's given them twice the amount of reasons to be buzzing.
It was so exciting yesterday, and people are still just buzzing and feeling, it's just really made our day. Obviously, that seems like an understatement, but it's just a special day today as well.
He says Zoe's presence at the school will have a massive impact on other pupils, as well as snow sports in general.
We're loving it. She's one of us, as you've heard from the girls, And the younger students now have got, an Olympic medalist who'll be in the gym in a few weeks' time. And I'm sure most of the kids are really waiting for her to get home so they can give her a personal congratulations.
Wanaka Ski and Snow Sports Club Secretary Bonnie Teat also agrees the medals will have massive ramifications for snow sports.
Well, the way that I look at it, I think that any child who has ever been to the snow will look at this and think, I could do that. Maybe I can go to the Olympics.
Bonnie Teat believes the country's first gold medalist will soon follow. In fact, she has her fingers crossed for Carlos Garcia Knight in tomorrow night's snowboarding big air final. For Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Yes, so Zoe won in the women's, well, she came third in the women's, quite an extraordinary achievement for a 16-year-old. Carlos Garcia Knight, who was at the ripe old age of 20 in the men's final tomorrow. Remember, he qualified number one. He joined us on Checkpoint on Tuesday or Wednesday night. What a delightful young men. They're really impressive young people. They speak freely. So many of our senior sports people speak as if they're looking over their shoulder to a noisy focus group, but these kids speak as if they were just delighted to be having such a wonderful time. Speaking of people who are delighted to be having such a wonderful time, we're losing one of them from RNZ. We've got a photo of him, and here he is, Matt Chatterton, proudly wearing his Crusaders shirt. He has been a sports reporter here. He's an absolute delight, and we recorded a sports chat with him today, previewing the Super Rugby competition, which starts tonight, of course, with the Blues playing the Highlanders down in Dunedin. That'll be a cracker of a game. Tomorrow, the Crusaders Chiefs in Christchurch, and then the Canes are playing the Bulls over in South Africa on Sunday morning. But because there were so many things breaking today, Barnaby Joyce standing down, Sir Martin Weaver's standing down, the assisted suicide verdicts, and much more, we haven't had time to fit in Matt Chatterton's chat, so it's going to be on Facebook. But we want to say to Matt that it has been just a delight working with you. And every time you discuss sport, even my colleagues who unbelievably aren't remotely interested in sport, smile. And isn't that a lovely way to be described? Matt is off on his big OE, and on behalf of the team here at RNZ, we wish you bon voyage. It has been a joy having you around, Matt, and we hope you come back when you're done with travelling. On behalf of the Checkpoint team, that is it for the weekend. Gosh, I work with a great team of people. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. We'll be back Monday at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Euthanasia advocate Susan Austin, who's been cleared on charges of assisted suicide, says she's relieved the court case is over. Universities say the government zero-free policy has increased their administration costs, but there's been little change in enrolments. A Kaipara man will serve 4 months community detention for the June 2016 crash that killed his wife, daughter and a family friend. Sir Martin Weavers has resigned as chair of EQC as the government says it will speed up the processing of unresolved Christchurch quake claims. And Barnaby Joyce is stepping down as Australia's Deputy Prime Minister after weeks of extreme pressure over an affair with a staff member. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Auckland's building boom. Open plan offices and classrooms